Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Definitely didn't press the wrong scene there in OBS for a couple of seconds. We'll ignore that. We're talking today, of course, about Manchester City's new man, Matheus Nunes. He signed for a fee of around like 60 million quid, something like that. It's not kind of leaked, but that is the expected fee. And I wanted to know a little bit more about our new signing from Wolves. Of course, the Portuguese international previously was at Sporting. And today I thought it'd be a good idea to take a bigger look past Wolves at why Manchester City signed him. And this wonderful gentleman alongside me, Zach Lowy, from Breaking the Lines. He owns that. Go and check it out. Of course, the link will be in the description below. Wonderful breakdown of football. Wonderful site. Zach, welcome to the channel, mate. Good to have you.
It's great to be on. Really excited to be discussing Matheus Nunes and City's business today. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
My pleasure, man. You've already taught me something. It's Nunes. I gotta start pronouncing it correctly. I'm so bad at pronunciations. It just gets me now. It's Nunes then, is it? It's pronounced Nunes. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll take your word for that.
Yeah, Nunes is more for like Spanish last name.
Okay, right. Well, we'll get there eventually. So obviously, I invited Zach over because I was speaking to David Cartledge from ESPN, who've done videos before about Torres and Rodri, and I said, who do I can speak to about his time at Sporting? And straight away, David was like, go to Zach. Zach's your man for this. And I popped into his DMs, and this is where we're at now. So I'd like to chat today, Zach, if that's all right. Mainly, of course, I know you've not followed him a lot of Wolves, but a lot of us people watching this know about his time at Wolves. But I feel like it's fair to say that what drew people to Matheus Nunes initially was his time at Sporting, and obviously there's that infamous Guardiola quote where he said he's one of the best players in the world, and I think we all know that City have been watching him since then. So I thought it'd be a good chance to look at that and work out why City are in for him, and of course that it feels fair to go back. So I'd like to talk about your reaction, his time at Sporting, his position, his strengths, his weaknesses, his potential, Pep style. But initially, what was your reaction when this transfer happened?
Yeah, I mean, I guess somewhat surprise because I'll admit I haven't been watching too much of Wolves, but they did just narrowly avoid relegation. So I think that, I didn't get the impression that he set the world alight in his first season. But yeah, as you mentioned, the potential was clear from his time at Sporting. So, and I have watched every single City match this season apart from the Newcastle game. And I do think that they have been, despite their fantastic record, I do think that they've been lacking somewhat in terms of a Gundogan replacement. Yeah. Obviously, he's irreplaceable. But I think that, for all the good stuff that Mateo Kovacic provides, they're still kind of lacking that player who can really drive forward, connect with players in the final third, and provide that genuine box-to-box presence. So I think that's the biggest question. Can Nunes fill what Gundogan was doing in the final third? That's going to be a really big question. It's interesting as well because I do think that they are somewhat similar, Kovacic and Nunes, because I think one of the biggest attributes that they both share is just the ability to shield the ball under pressure, to drive forward with the ball. But I do think that Nunes is maybe not a better player right now, but I definitely think his ceiling is a lot higher. I think that he's definitely capable of slotting into a Manchester City team and winning a starting spot.
Okay, so the big words there. I can't wait and hope that's prescient there. So let's go back to his time at Sporting, because there's that famous quote from Guardiola when Man City played Lisbon, and Sporting, sorry, not Sporting. They hate being called Lisbon, Sporting Lisbon. But we played them and we beat them, and often Guardiola can damn teams with fake praise, where he talks about how great they are after they've just spanked them, by many goals. But he did talk about Matheus Nunes as he said he's one of the best players in the world, at the time. And obviously you were watching him back then, was how much of that was hyperbole? How well was he playing? Was he exciting as Pep was saying back then?
Yeah, so I guess that was February 2022, March 2022. It's funny, to be fair, because I think that he was playing very well, but then I think right after the Pep quotes, he really fell off. And me as somebody who was watching every single Sporting match, I was saying, what, I feel like Sporting maybe should bench him. But then he started the 2022-23 season off in phenomenal fashion, was scoring so many tremendous golazos, just driving forward, had a brilliant game against Braga in their league opener, and then gets sold just 3 days before their Porto match, the first big match of the season for Sporting, really. So I do think that, this isn't just Pep saying stuff for the sake of it, for hyperbole's sake. I don't know if I would have considered him one of the best players in the world, but definitely one of the best players in Portugal, because you have to look at the context and look at what Matheus has done. It's truly been nothing short of phenomenal. Obviously he was born in Rio
Yeah.
de Janeiro, moved to Portugal at a young age, and he's just talked a lot about the influence that his mother and stepdad have had in his development, saying, if it weren't for them, I'd be a thief or a drug dealer or stuff. So he hasn't had an easy route to it. And, he went through some smaller clubs like Eraquerense and Estoril,
Yeah.
and then made his way to Sporting. And just about 5 years ago, he was getting up at like 5 in the morning and working at his parents' bakery, and then going to train at Sporting. So
Didn't
this
know
is
that.
somebody who really had to work his way to the top. But you can go and Google this and try to find the quote, but right when Sporting paid a record sum for Ruben Amorim to sign him as their manager, there was a lot of controversy. Why are Sporting paying all this money for a manager with like a few months of managerial experience at Braga? And the president, Frederico Varanda, said, Matheus Nunes' sale alone will pay for the 13 million or whatever that Amorim cost. So he was saying this about a player who I don't even think had debuted in the first team. So a lot of pressure on his shoulders. But I think gradually he was able to kind of make a name for himself. We saw that in the title winning season, ending the 19-year title drought back in 2021, where although he wasn't a starter with Joao Paulinho and Joao Mario slotting into the double pivot, he was used in a number of positions, whether that's midfield or even right wing back, and he came up absolutely massive with some crucial goals, especially during very very tight moments of the game.
Yeah.
So after that, I think that was what turned Sporting's head, and what made them decide to not sign Joao Mario on a permanent deal after his really good loan spell. They were like, you know what, Nunes is the future. Nunes is somebody who's going to give us a lot more money than Joao Mario is. So they went with Nunes, and they really pushed him in, and that 2021-22 season, it was definitely I guess a baptism of fire, as they call it, because Paulinho, although he was still there, he was injured for large swaths of the season. And yeah, it was kind of Matheus being asked to really be not just the box-to-box midfielder, but sometimes the defensive midfielder alongside another player like Ugarte. But above all, he's just somebody who's had to deal with a lot of
Okay.
responsibility, and that's always stuck out to me. The amount of really the grace that he deals with pressure.
That's interesting, that, because I mean that's the kind of stuff that paints the picture of a player. Like that kind of stuff. It does form who they are, and it's obviously not a rare story to see how much players have to work, but that you respect where they come from and how they've had to earn that, and to have that much pressure put on your shoulders so young, and obviously a club at the size of Sporting, that is a lot, and a lot of people wilt under that kind of pressure. So it says an awful lot about his ability, and you sort of touched on it a little bit there as well, but I did want to ask you about his position, because we know what Pep's like with positions. I mean Pep, you play anywhere under Pep Guardiola. If he sees, you can wake up one day and decide he's a goalkeeper now. You never know what he's going to do. What do you see as his best position, and where do you think he's capable of playing off? Because under Guardiola, I mean, that versatility could be useful if he has it to his game.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously, he's not going to be playing much at DM with the best DM in the world, Rodri in
Correct.
Manchester City. But I think that he's probably best off as a box-to-box midfielder. When I look at Matheus's game, yeah, I think that although there are plenty of areas that need to be filled in, that need to be polished, I think he's a very complete midfielder. He's tenacious, he's aggressive. He's never going to shy away from going into a ground duel and winning the ball back. So I think there's a lot to like there. I think above all, he's just very good at picking the ball up in deep areas and driving forward with the ball. So I think that reflects a box-to-box midfielder. Like I said, still some room for improvement in terms of getting those goals up, in terms of improving his passing range, because I think there are times where maybe he will overhit or underhit a long ball, but I definitely think that will improve with Guardiola. So I think passing, decision making, we'll get to that later, but I do think that above all, he's a complete player
Yeah.
who so good in terms of the physical style. That was one thing when watching him at Sporting. I knew that it was only a matter of time before Matheus was going to the Prem, and I felt that one of the reasons was that physicality about his
Yeah.
game. Even we're talking about somebody who's what, 22, 21, so still has a lot of room to add muscle, both in his torso as well as his upper body. So I think that once he really grows out his physical frame, this is going to be somebody who's really tough to deal with, because already he is such a tough player to rob of possession. And I think that going to City is going to make him go up even another level, because there are some things that can be tweaked in terms of like his first touch, in terms of his correct body position when receiving. But I think above all, it's just that ability to just drive the ball forward and to scan to make sure of his surroundings. That's something that I know Guardiola loves, when his midfielders are constantly scanning,
Yeah.
constantly checking who's around him. That's something that Matheus does a lot. So yeah, I think he's a tremendous player. And I have to be honest, when he did make the move to Wolves, I just felt, yeah, this has got to be a short-term stop. I was a bit surprised, but I also felt like, you know what, maybe he needs to spend a year in the Prem to get a move to
Yeah.
a top-tier club, and that's clearly how it's worked out. So, credit to him. He's had to work a lot to get to the pinnacle of European football. But yeah, I think that he's a really good prospect, and I think that there's just really the sky is the limit when it comes to
Okay.
Matheus Nunes.
Well, you've touched on a few things I was going to ask you there anyway. But I mean, the next kind I was going to ask you was about his strengths. So would you say that's his particular strength then? So obviously, we'll go for strengths, and then we'll get to his weaknesses. I was going to ask you about his potential, which we'll dive into a little bit more detail in a minute as well. But if we talk about his strengths, is it fair to say then his physicality, his pace, his dribbling, is that a fair summation? Do you think he's got the intelligence to play as a six potentially? Obviously, Rodri's there, but what would you say his strengths are?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned them all there. I think as far as a six goes, well, obviously, you look at the backup options. I think Maximo Perrone has been loaned out to Las
Yeah.
Palmas. And Calvin Phillips, I think Pep Guardiola is going to send him to the U23s at this rate. But to be fair, I mean, the thing about the six is it just requires a lot of experience. It's one of those positions where really, that crystallized intelligence comes into effect so much. So I do think that with a few years under Pep, I don't see why he couldn't transition to another position, right? We've seen that with so many players,
Yeah.
whether that's Akanji, Ake, so many players adapting to a new role. I don't see why he couldn't, but I do think that his best role is certainly that box-to-box role, being able to pick the ball up in deep areas, drive it forward, and push it to the likes of Alvarez, Grealish,
Yeah. Yeah.
Haaland. He's definitely a complete box-to-box midfielder, and you mentioned pace. One thing I would also add is just that ability to change direction and change pace, so he can kind of slow it down and then speed it up when he's driving forward on the counter, and that makes him just such an effective ball carrier. So yeah, he's somebody who I think, it's no surprise to me that when the Paqueta deal went haywire, City decided to turn to Matheus Nunes, because he's definitely somebody who, like Paqueta, is very skilled at just taking the ball under pressure
Yeah.
and weaving through 4 or 5 players. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that at Sporting, where he just picked the ball up and went through 3 or 4 opponents before setting up his teammates with a dangerous pass. One thing I will say though is, I think perhaps because he knows he's such a good dribbler, there are some times where maybe he won't release it when he needs to, and that is something that he's definitely going to need to work on when playing against deep blocks that are going to look to hit on the counter. Knowing when to time his passes.
Yeah, that touches on his potential weaknesses. So, what are the rough edges there? So, of course, it's decision making a little bit. Do you think his passing is up to Manchester City standards? Because obviously, we're talking about the top 1% of stuff when you play for Manchester City.
Yeah.
Like, is there any holes in his game that you think will stand out other than maybe his decision making?
Passing is definitely something that could use some refinement, right? I think that he's capable of playing some fantastic cross-field switches, some really good through balls, but it's just, I think, in terms of the consistency, as well as being able to wait the passes well. I think that's something that he's going to improve a lot, playing in a possession heavy system. Not just playing under Guardiola, but playing in a team like City as opposed to Wolves that wants to have the ball. I would also say, maybe he needs a little bit of work in terms of heading, in terms of aerial duels. I think that if
Yeah,
he can take that to the next level, because you look at someone like Rodri, who is just indomitable in the air. That should be his target, being able to just come out in the air and win the ball most times.
yeah.
So that's something, heading, decision making. And yeah, I would also add, as good as he is in terms of driving forward with the ball, I think that he also could improve um, in terms of his first touch, as well as I would probably say, maybe having a better body position to receive the ball, because
Yeah.
I think when you have a less than ideal body position, combined with a sometimes heavy first touch, that can definitely make for an awkward arrangement. But like I said, he's somebody who's just so skilled at taking the ball from one end to the other. And yeah, some people, they might not appreciate that. They're like, where are the goals? Where are the assists? That's still yet to come. I think that's something that he can improve on. He does have what it takes to be like a consistent 10 goal player. We
Okay.
saw that, like I said, at the title winning season, chipping in with so many big goals when he had barely played a few minutes at the first team level. But he's somebody who, like I said, has got ice in his veins.
That's interesting because we talked about what he could do there. I mean, it leads me on to the next point we'll talk about was his potential, And obviously potential, the various levels that you could compare him to because, you could talk about potential to be a great player. He already is. But then you could talk about his potential at a Manchester City level. And we're being honest, I'm very lucky over the past, decade or so to watch some of the greatest in midfield to ever do it. Not just, in the league, you're talking about, De Bruyne, David Silva, Yaya Toure, Fernandinho, Gundogan. And now Rodri's up there as well, seemingly. Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden's trying to break through midfield. Finally, it's a ridiculously high level. That City demand of their midfielders. But what would you say Nunes' potential is? You talk about what about being potential? Like, what do you see him in the future as? You talked about maybe him adding more goals to his game. How far can he go? Do you think he can reach those limits? Because he's mid-20s right now. He's obviously got a lot to go with his career. How far can he go?
Yeah, I think I'm tempted to say that he can become world class. I don't think there's too much separating him from a world class midfielder. And I mean, I think as well, like, who are the world class midfielders in Europe? I guess you could talk about guys like De Bruyne, Rodri, Camavinga, and I mean, obviously he's not at their level yet, but I do think he's maybe like a step below or two steps below. So I think that it just comes with experience in terms of, yeah, being a more reliable player in possession, because that's one thing that I think a lot of City players tend to struggle with when they first arrive, and it's something that maybe Jeremy Doku is going to struggle with. But like, they're used to being the star of the show. Obviously, that was Jack Grealish at Aston Villa,
Yeah.
and now they're asked to be like a cog in the system, right? They're asked to not overcomplicate things, because the biggest tenet of what Guardiola is after is building possession, not giving it away in dangerous areas, and just wearing your opponent out. So I think those are some big things: decision making, improving the consistency and the passing range, and I would also say working on heading in terms of aerial duels and getting into the box, becoming a threat, not just in offensive set pieces, but defensive set
Do you think he
pieces as
has the
well.
mentality and patience to do all that? Like in terms of
Yeah.
like obviously he went on strike at Wolves to move on. I mean, naturally as fans, you look at that and you go, is that an alarm bell? You never know. It
Yeah.
might not be, but what like does he have the temperament for it based off what you've seen of his time at Sporting?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely disappointed when I saw him going on strike to leave Wolves, but that's just modern football now, and oftentimes it's not like Matheus who's doing that. I'm not trying to absolve him, but it's the agent who's saying, if you want to move to Manchester City, you got to do this, you got to do that, and eventually it worked in his favor. But yeah, I think in terms of patience, you just have to look at his life, right? What, 25, 24 years of age now, and he's just had to work so hard, whether that's, you know, playing in these smaller clubs in Portugal, getting, impressing with limited opportunities at Sporting, and just where he's come from to where he is now. It's a testament to his work ethic and his dedication to improving himself, and I think that definitely came to the fore over the few years that he was at Sporting. I was
Yeah.
just, being able to watch him develop from an unpolished player to really, yeah, putting on more muscle and just being more intelligent in his decisions, and somebody who just isn't afraid to step up, whether that's playing in the Champions League or playing, against teams like Benfica, Porto, or Braga. He's somebody who, yeah, is going to rise to the occasion, and I think has what it takes to be a big game player for them.
And final question, mate. Given what you know about him, do you feel like he's going to adapt to Pep's style? Or will Pep's style adapt to him? Given his tendencies to drive forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he could adapt to Pep's style of football?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I think that with regards to Pep's style, it's almost so hard to define, because one thing that we've seen about City over the years is they're constantly experimenting,
Yeah,
constantly changing, to the point where you really don't know what they're going to hit you with. Is it going to be a back three? Is it going to be a back four? Is it going to be, with two strikers with Alvarez and Haaland? What I think that's what makes City such a dominant side, is they're constantly trying to find ways to switch things up. But I think that with regards to arguably, on paper at least, the best City team of all time last season, we saw really a team that was, I would call it the anti-Pep, the most anti-Pep team of them all, because I think just so focused on on defensive stability, right? With four center backs and
yeah,
as well bring in players like John Stones into midfield alongside Rodri. And I just think that, the core tenet remains, though, from that team. You want to have as much possession as possible. You want to tire out the team. You want to make it so that,
yeah.
yeah, like the saying goes, the best form of defense is having the ball for 99% of the time. And I just think that Matheus, he's somebody who I think is going to provide a lot of attributes that are currently lacking in this City team. Because um, I just think that if there was going to be one way that City were not going to repeat and not win their fourth straight league title, it would be that gaping hole in midfield left by Gundogan. And so I think that what the Mateus deal is ultimately, it's a long-term replacement for him,
Okay.
you know. And I think that he's somebody who, yeah, was desperately needed. He's somebody who's just so skilled both on and off the ball. And yeah, I think it's going to take a while for him to get up to that world class level, that Ilkay Gundogan tier. But the potential is clearly there with Matheus. And yeah, I have no doubt that he could become a world class player under the right coaching. And I also think that the one thing that's good about this is, um, I mean, obviously, there's a degree of pressure. There is a lot of pressure, but I also don't think that there's necessarily a ton of pressure on him to become a starter immediately,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, well, I guess there is a bit with De Bruyne out, but with that being said, there are players who are going to be capable of filling in if he's not necessarily ready, and that's something that, right, we've seen a lot of with players in their debut seasons, starting off from the bench, taking a little time to adapt and become a starter. So yeah, I think that he's definitely capable of becoming a top tier player and becoming one of the best midfielders in world football.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful way to end this video, Zach, and I hope you're right, mate. Absolutely. And Zach, thank you very much for coming on the channel. It's massively appreciated. Guys, don't forget, of course, you can check out Zach by clicking the link in the description. I've got a link to his Twitter up there, where you can find, obviously, links to breaking the lines as well. Wonderful breakdown of what this man is going to bring to us, Matheus Nunes. I can't wait to see him a little bit more now, mate. Thank you very much, Zach.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And yeah, hope to be on this show again.
My pleasure, mate, and I'm sure we'll chat again very, very soon. Thank you so much for that, guys. Thank you for watching as well. If you are, of course, in the chat, you're a superstar. Give this video a like, help support the channel, of course, and subscribe if you're new. Check out all the myriad of content. So much on the channel recently during the madness that is deadline day. Go and watch all the billion videos over there. And I'll catch you soon for another video. Probably my match preview, which should probably be out tomorrow at this point. I don't know if I've edited it, recorded it. Who knows what the world's going to be doing. But for now, enjoy the rest of deadline day. Thank you very much, Zach. Catch you all soon. Bye-bye.